been a big day for Mr Shorten, who's with me now live. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on your show, Kieran.
You've had the press club address today. I want to start with a big picture question of you, because you described it as a landmark report. Do you have a message of optimism and hope for families with people with disability and the people with disability themselves? Do you think you can fix this thing?
I think we can create a more inclusive Australia, yes. The NDIS is here to stay. Labor is absolutely committed to it. We want to put people with disability at the centre of all decision making. Their interests have got to be the first set of interests in any matter. So what we want to do, though, is that we recognise it's growing faster in terms of costs than it should be, and 98% of all the people I speak to know that. What people want to know is that, are they going to be okay? And I'm here to say yes. We want to make sure that depending on a person's disability, you can get support from the NDIS if it's very significant and permanent, or if it's disability which doesn't impact you quite as often in your development in your day, then you can get some supports outside the NDIS.
So you're optimistic?
Yeah, I really am. Yeah,
it's not an easy space, but how do you see it in terms of the challenge for you?
Tell you how strong I feel. I bleed NDIS. For me, it really matters. For me, if I accomplish nothing else in public life, getting the NDIS right is really important. But it's much more than that, and it's certainly not about me. It's about a person could be born with a disability. You can get it in the blink of an eye on a country road. You can get it just through the particular lottery and DNA code you've got. But that shouldn't define you.
No. And I speak from personal experience. My nephew is 18, cerebral palsy. My brother, thankfully, and his wife are very well off, but they still find it very challenging. What about those people in the suburbs, the postcodes where you spoke about today, where it's a very different story?
That's right. When the scheme works well, it's working really well. But what I'd remind all Australians is, before the NDIS, it was a disaster. You'd have to fundraise for your wheelchair or a place to live. The only way you could get support really was if today was worse than yesterday, and if tomorrow was going to be even bigger bin fire than today.
But you can have 3 degrees and still find it hard to navigate this thing.
I'm saying what it was like beforehand. But this is why we've got to reboot the scheme, an NDIS Mark II, because the system is still too bureaucratic. It's traumatising, it's exhausting, it's debilitating. You need a PhD, a cut lunch, and a sniffer dog to work out how to get through the system. That's why we're reinvesting in making the agency better. Here's some simple proof points. 1, the person who does your plan or your budget when you go on the scheme, it'd be good if that was the same person you could ring afterwards.
Yeah.
2, we want to make sure that the people who are giving you advice know what they're doing and that they understand disability. So we'll do a range of these.
And the navigators, that's a really good idea from Bruce Bonahady and
the review, yes.
Lisa Paul.
Yes, Lisa Paul.
That makes a lot of sense, because when you get to the NDIS, you need to know where to look, where to go.
It's not enough. The job it's not about just giving you a package of money, patting your head and saying, good luck. People still got questions, they still need advice, they've got to work out how to get the best out of their support. So we want to have a more human entry point with people who know what they're talking about. And a lot of people do, but just make it more consistent. But then what we also need is someone to sort of metaphorically hold your hand as you go through the journey. A navigator for every 40 or 50 families, that'd be just excellent. Someone who you don't have to keep telling your story to time and time again.
We've discussed the fraud and the shonks before. Are you confident that what you've got here as a prescription will get rid of those?
I'm confident that we're now taking it seriously. I can never say that the world will be crook-free. What I can say, though, is to some of these NDIS millionaires, and they're not just people breaking the law, they might be people over-servicing, under-delivering. The good old days of a sort of Wild West, they're coming to an end. You've got to be accountable for what you do. We want lots of service providers in the system, and most service providers are excellent. But what we've got to do is make sure that they're accountable. There is crime, there is fraud, and there's the old-fashioned taking a lend of it. There's this view that because it's government money, you can overcharge a person with a disability on the scheme and they'll just get the money back off the government. So to some extent, the people rorting the system say, well, it's government money, it's not really the disabled person's money. But that's not right. It is actually the person with a disability's money, and you don't steal from them ever.
No, exactly. That's the lowest of the low. And the sooner you get rid of those individuals, the better. The family-centred practices for children with disability, that's another interesting idea. Can you just explain that for our viewers?
It's all about best practice. First of all, kids are born, they're beautiful, precious, but some kids don't develop in a standard way. They develop in a non-standard journey. The earlier we can work that out, the better. So, and the review sort of talks about this situation in the years to come, universal screening. Then once you know what the child's needs are, you can not only work out, the child's needs may be mild, they might need to be on the NDIS, but they do need some help with speech pathology, allied health professionals. But also families need help. The way this scheme's rolled out is that a lot of the services are provided as if the recipient's an adult, hour to hour, on many hours of direct individual therapy. But quite often what families want to know is how they can do it, how they can raise their child and get the support. And to some extent, in the rush to these individual services, family-centric support's been overlooked, and we want to put families back in the middle of it.
Yeah, again, it's another recommendation that seems a no-brainer to me.
It does.
On the assessments, this is something which, as you know, and 60% of the population have some visibility of disability, and so they know that this is a sensitive issue because you don't want to have to prove every year that you've got the same disability. Right. But in this sense, you're saying, if I can just simplify, you're basically saying you're going to humanise this process. You're going to make sure that the individual with the disability will be heard as opposed to being done by someone who doesn't even know the person.
What we need to do is, it can't just be someone's medical diagnosis alone that gets them on the scheme, because what happens is people then get written to that diagnosis. What matters is how your diagnosis of disability affects you. Yes. And what we've got to do is, if it's about an individual support package, then we've got to talk to the individual and the people who do the assessment.
That's an interesting benchmark. So it's not about the diagnosis, it's about the impairment and the effect on your life.
And how it affects you, yes. That's what it should have been all along. And by the way, some people's, I'm not going to split hairs. Some people's diagnosis is so immediately clear that they're going to need help. That's fair enough. Yeah. So no one should panic. But what it is saying is, let's look at what the individual needs and personalise the support rather than just sort of...
So they'll be listened to and their family will be listened to.
And we'll have proper qualified specialists, people working with the agency who understand disability, and it won't be a 20-minute cookie-cutter interview. So we're going to change how we talk to people. We're going to change who's doing the talking and the listening. But then the other thing we want to do is, once there is an assessment, then we go back and talk to the person again about it.
Yeah, well, it's a world first, and as you rightly point out, internationally seen as a great thing. I think everyone wishes you success on this one.
I would just say
it's not a political issue, this one.
I mean, to the people who say...
bipartisan support for it.
Well, there is from the major parties. I don't know where the Greens are going to go. The reality is, though, that people who say it's too hard and you shouldn't touch anything, that's actually dangerous, because giving up on reform, that would be a mistake. And the other group I'm most concerned with in all this is people who've got battled to get a package of support. Nothing's changing overnight. The scheme's going to grow every year. This isn't about cutting off lots and lots of people. It's about making sure that the scheme's working with the best interest of the participant and the family.
Minister, I very much appreciate your time. Thanks.
Yeah, lovely. Cheers.